Well, welcome everyone to yet another wonderful event on our Year of Joy. I wanted to remind people about the Year of Joy, and if you haven't already joined the community, to please do so. It is a free community for everyone to build their joy muscles. We are so fortunate to have so many superpower joy experts like we have today, and you get to learn a lot. You get to get some new tips and tools to build your joy. And there's this wonderful chat forum where you'll be able to talk to others and share your stories. A wonderful way to build more joy in the world. And we always say we like that ripple effect. If you become more joyful and you share that with one other person, and that person shares it with another person, you'd be surprised how this world could look different in just a short period of time. I'm not going to take too much time talking about the Year of Joy, but as you can hear in my voice, I am passionate about it. So please check us out. And if you need any more information, feel free to contact us. I'd like to have Andrew join me. He's the co-founder with myself on the Year of Joy and the Art and Science of Joy. And he'll start us off for today. Andrew.
Thanks, Debbie, for the wonderful introduction to the Year of Joy, and welcome everybody on my behalf. I have the honor of introducing Paul. I also had the pleasure of talking with Paul on my podcast, so I'm a little ahead of the game of knowing what a delight Paul has in store with us today. But I'd just like to share a few words about Paul before we begin, for those of you who don't know him. Dr. Paul Zak is a professor at Claremont Graduate University. Paul's 2 decades of research have taken him from the Pentagon to Fortune 50 boardrooms to the rainforest of Papua New Guinea. His most recent book is Immersion, The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. In 2017, Paul founded Immersion Neuroscience, a software platform that allows anyone to measure what the brain loves in real time, that is used to improve outcomes in entertainment, education, advertising, and to monitor emotional wellness. He's a regular TEDx speaker and has appeared on Good Morning America, Dr. Phil, Fox and Friends, ABC Evening News, and more. So very much welcome to this live stream event, Paul.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you, Debbie, for having me on. So without to talk for a little bit, our goal here is to create conversation. I don't want to lecture for an hour. I'd rather have a dialogue with everybody here. So let's start out with just kind of setting some ideas in the ether here so we can discuss. The first is, why would we be interested in joy? I mean, it's sort of obvious. We don't want to be sad, but there's a very strong relationship between people's affective state, their emotional state, and their health span, right? So health span is how long you live a healthy life. And there are basically 4 things you can control that affect that. So part of that's due to genetics, part of it is due to luck. But the 4 major things you control are sleep, exercise, diet. That's all easy to measure. And the 4th is the quality of your social interactions. So our social network, having a rich social network, is in fact more important to extending your health span than is quitting smoking, which seems crazy, right? I mean, how is that even possible? So it's possible because as social creatures, it's essential for us to connect to other people. So much of our joy, although we can certainly generate it internally, comes from our connection with and interaction with other people. So I want to talk a little about how that social connection from a neurologic perspective creates greater joy and extends health spans. So a couple things to kind of talk about. So if we think about the impact of joy on our overall satisfaction with life, you can think of this as a kind of a summing effect, right? So when I have these really extraordinary experiences, these experiences of joy, then it kind of stretches your brain so that you're able to have more of those experiences in the future. So there are, personality traits that tend to have more or less joy in their lives. So people who by personality tend to be more neurotic, more worried, more anxious, they're kind of burning bandwidth on just kind of maintaining life and they're less open to joyful experiences. And so that's a time for kind of coaching, counseling, looking inside yourself, lots of things you can do to kind of overcome those basic personality traits. But as we add up all those experiences, we also expand our brain so we can have more of them. The term of art in neuroscience is neuroplasticity, right? So when I have an extraordinary experience, high joy, then I sort of stretch the brain a little bit to go, oh, I can do this thing now. It's like when you're learning a sport or anything you're doing. But, if you've ever played tennis, right? When you're first playing it, you have to think a lot about it. It's really hard. Where to put my feet? Where are my hips? How do I hold the handle? And then once you continue to, practice, you get better and better, it becomes really easy. And then at some point you switch from this being a stressful, difficult task to being an enjoyable task. So that's exactly what you can do in other aspects of your life, which is gain some mastery over it. Maybe struggle. Struggle is actually very valuable to the brain. So hard but achievable goals are really compelling for a lot of people. And then once you gain that sense of mastery, then executing this thing, doing this task. And the literature shows that when you do these tasks for which you have mastery with other people, then you actually increase neurologically the value the brain gets from this experience. And that value is emotional value, which can create joy. So what's the formula here? I want to do tasks that are hard but achievable. I want to get better at them. I want to do them with other people. And I want to have those tasks produce a kind of joy. So how do I do that? Well, one is I really got to invest first in that task, but also invest in the relationship, right? So Debbie made a joke earlier about, hey, if it's 5 o'clock where you are, feel free to have a cocktail. So we do find that moderate amounts of alcohol can facilitate greater social bonding. So happy hour, sure, not every day, that's too much, but time or two a week, great excuse to get together and have that kind of social bonding. But more generally, we find that strong social bonds are built when you invest in relationships. Invest means I've got to be of service to other people. So if I want to build this strong, powerful relationship with my friends, with my family, with my spouse, I've really got to invest resources to improve their lives. It's this reciprocation that builds the strength of relationships. So if I'm not investing in making my wife happy, then at some point she may think, why am I with this dude anyway? Like what, but if I show up with flowers occasionally, take her to dinner, listen to her when she has a problem she wants to share or happiness she wants to share, I'm investing in that relationship. So same thing with friendships. So I'll give you a concrete example. I'm an introvert. Introverts have no problem having joyful experiences. We just need less talking time with other people. I'm not shy. I'm happy to go to parties and meetings, and it's all fun for me. I just need less of that than people who are extroverts. And so some years ago, I turned 50, and I had 4 surprise birthday parties. And they were happening to me as a kid. Why? Not because I'm so special. It's because I really took my research seriously and invested in different relationships. And it turns out that all those, well, not all, but a bunch of people in those different circles for which I had invested time, energy, helping other people, wanted to reciprocate. And what an amazing experience to have that much joy, love, call it what you want, people who care about me. So that's building that rich social network. And it's just an example of the kind of richness that you can have. But I had to make the investment first, right? I had to call this person up. I had to meet them for lunch, help them with some project. So it's really building those joy muscles, right? So even as introverts, we can do this. And by the way, I talked about, the sort of downside of neuroticism. So people who are neurotic tend to have less joy in their life. They tend to have lower satisfaction with life. Again, you can kind of battle that a little bit. There are another set of personality traits for which people have a lot of joy, a lot more friends, and higher life satisfaction and longer health span. And if you're lucky enough to have those personality traits, you're already ahead of the game relative to everybody else. And those are people who are agreeable and people who are empathic. So if you're high in agreeableness and high in empathy, you're a people person, you're warm, people want to be around you, and you're naturally of service to other people. So I'll give you a concrete example, and then I'll give you a couple takeaways, and then hopefully Andrew and I can have a nice conversation about this. I was in South Africa recently. So for me, it's about a 24-hour flight to get home from South Africa. Set of flights, it's long, you're going to be tired, you're sleeping for a bunch of that. Anyway, my first flight was from Cape Town to New York, and that's about a 15-hour flight. You got to get to the airport a couple hours early. You're already kind of tired. I had the world's best flight attendant on this flight. I'll give props to United Airlines. It was a United Airlines flight. And, you're sleeping for part of it. You're having a meal, or having a couple meals probably. And this flight attendant was amazing. It was a gentleman who was American, but he was just loved his job. Always smiled when he talked to me, anticipated my needs, would bring me things without me asking. Just amazing. And I chatted with him at the end, and I said, this was a pretty arduous flight, but it was so enjoyable because you seem to really love what you were doing. And he goes, oh yeah, I love helping people. Like, it just gives me so much energy. So he was the right, his personality fit the kind of job he was in. And this is the cool thing about that joy muscle. It's contagious. Oh no, yeah, it's true. So when we measure people having extraordinary experiences neurologically, measure their brains, we find is that if I'm having an extraordinary experience and I'm hanging out with Andrew, I will infect him with my joy. So talk about investing in a social relationship, right? So with that kind of contagion effect, joy can be spread. And I think the year of joy is such a brilliant idea to have the opportunity to spread that joy as far and wide as possible. So I'm going to give you one more takeaway, and then I'll ask Andrew to join me in conversation. So you may have heard of these cities that are called blue zones. These are cities in which people regularly live past 100. I happen to live in the only one in the United States, not by design, but by accident. So I live in a city called Loma Linda, California. Loma Linda is a company town. The company is a medical center, which is run by a Protestant religious group called Seventh-day Adventist, of which I'm not a member, I should say. So Seventh-day Adventists are vegetarian. They don't drink, they don't smoke, they exercise, and they are predominantly in helping professions, doctors, nurses, teachers. So we have done research in my laboratory with the very old in Loma Linda, because we can oversample people in their 90s and even hundreds, because people live here that long. And often they have a lot of joy. Not always, but often have a lot of joy. They have quite special behaviors. So because they're in helping professions, even once they retire, they always want to help. So we ran a study, for example, where we went every day for 8 days. We drew blood, we measured vital signs. Part of these individuals got a drug. I mean, it's kind of very intensive study, and then follow up every week for a couple of weeks. And so I was going to this retirement home. Again, lots of permissions, everyone signed off, and it's all ethical and all that stuff. And went to this retirement home with my team, every day, and on and on for a month. And a lot of the people there, and again, women tend to live longer than men, so predominantly older women, were just lovely, lovely individuals. So much so that after I finished the study, I started taking my kids once a month to visit some of their residents, because they're like just your sweetest grandmother. My grandmother's passed away a long time ago, so I don't have a grandmother. And these lovely women, even were running the experiment, they would show up with cookies and chocolates for my team, and they were just lovely, lovely people. So they had that joy muscle so strongly built that they shared it with everybody else, and they went into professions where they were of service to other people, and they live forever. So the joke we say in Loma Linda is that you can't kill a Seventh-day Adventist. They just literally won't die. They just live forever. But also they experience a lot of joy. Not always. People get sick. People get tired. But we find is that for people who have greater positive affect, who have more joy, more positive emotions, that they feel better, they move around more, they're taking generally fewer medications, they're more connected to people around them, and they live longer. So that extending the health span. So summarizing, 4 things you can do to extend your health span: diet, exercise, sleep, and living a joyful life, right? Having that sense of service, really connecting to other people. And we have developed technology that pulls data from smartwatches and fitness sensors that allows individuals to measure and gamify how much joy they are receiving and sharing. Again, that joy is contagious. So here's a QR code. The app is free. Currently, it's for iPhone only. So if you've got an iPhone or an iPad, you can scan this, download this from the App Store. You need a supported wearable to pull the data from smartwatches, Apple Watch, Whoop, Scosh, Polar, all kinds. We don't care what kind of wearable it is. We support bunches of them. And you can actually measure your joy every day. It'll give you feedback. It'll give you suggestions. So I think building joy can be hard sometimes because we don't really know how much we're getting and we don't have goals. So this app actually has a goal for your happiness every day. And again, that happiness is largely driven by the people you interact with and the sense of purpose, doing something which I'm gaining mastery over it. So when we have that sense of mastery and we have that social layer, I'm doing something really, interesting, difficult, but achievable with people that I care about, then that joy goes up and I close that ring on our app. The app's called Tuesday. Again, it's free in the App Store. So we really made a decision, my group, to make this free to everybody so that we can bring more joy in the world by helping people curate their lives for greater happiness. With that, I'm going to take a breath, have a drink of water, and would love to continue this conversation with my friend Andrew.
Amazing, Paul. Thank you for that introduction to how we can find more joy in our lives. Simple steps, which obviously take effort. I think that's one of the words that I took out. It's, and I think some people have a predisposition, as you said, and those 2 key things of empathy and agreeability. So some people have a head start, some have to work a little bit harder, but the other things, sleep, exercise, diet, social interactions, service, I think they're things we can all do if we really, really want to.
Andrew, I wonder if you, the best piece of advice you ever got. So I played this game. I was at happy hour. I mentioned that earlier with some friends a couple months ago. And I always like to think of interesting questions before I show up because I'm a super nerd, sorry. And so the question I posed to the group was, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten in your life? I want to pose that question to do. I'll share mine with you. It's relative to what you just said, which is I was in a undergraduate investment class, and the professor said, always pay yourself first. Now that sounds very selfish. What he meant was, if you can't, because of the compounding of interest, right, or any investment, stock market, always do your investments first. If you have to pay, tell the utility company you can't pay them this month, they'll wait, but you've got to invest in yourself first. This is the same thing as putting your mask on the airplane before you help somebody else. So I think the sleep, diet, exercise, those things mean invest in yourself, be healthy, be available to serve other people and build those social ties and share that joy, accentuate the joy that you get between individuals. If you're not getting those 3 things nailed down, then your ability to be of service and to connect to others is reduced. So I'm wondering, Andrew, what's the best and perhaps weirdest piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Oh man, there's just so many. I spend my life talking to so many wonderful people who have spent their whole lives researching and inspiring people in all different areas. So my brain is like all over the place when I'm thinking of this question. I think some things that just spontaneously came to mind when you said that. One was around mindset and sort of this focusing on what we can control and letting go of what we can't. So naturally, I think I've inherited from my mother what we would call a bit of a mitherer or a worrier. So can see lots of things that could go wrong in the future as a natural personality, right? To be aware that things could go wrong. So to have that mindset that that's okay to have concern for things, but to focus that concern on things you can control rather than on the things you can't control, which I think is super important, especially in today's world where the media is telling us all these, the whole world's going to pot, and there's so many different things that are bad happening. If you take on personal responsibility for those things you can't basically control,
or the serenity prayer
definitely eats at your joy.
Yeah. Can we pull out the little mini elephant in the room, which is you're in Finland, one of the happiest places in the world consistently, and yet Finns famously do not show a lot of emotional expression. And so I think for listeners, I don't, if I'm building that joy muscle, I don't need to be running around and blah, blah, blah. Now, Andrew, you have a beautiful smile. We talked about this before. You're always smiling, which makes me happy and brings me joy. But a lot of Finns, in fact, don't show a lot of emotion, famously. So can you tell us how you lived in Finland for a long time? Tell us how you felt when you first got there and how that has changed as you interacted with Finns.
Yeah, definitely. It's very, so it's part of Europe, but it's still a very different culture from many other places in Finland. I think historically, for those that don't know too much about the historical context of Finland, being sandwiched between Russia on the one hand and Sweden on the other, which through many centuries was a huge superpower. And, Finland playing the little neutral place in between these two big superpowers created a sense of inner strength. I think that it's not so much dependent upon what's happening outside. And they have this famous word in Finland called sisu, which is guts, bravery type thing, and this sort of stoicism in a way, I suppose the Greeks would call it. So there is this sense of I don't need to rely on externalities for my joy, my contentment, on the one hand. I think the other thing that, you really really when you live in Finland is the acceptance of high tax and the understanding that investment in education, in healthcare that comes a result of that is beneficial for the community and therefore beneficial for the individual. And so, this sense of belonging happens, I think, on that societal level, which I think creates an average contentment with life. Whereas maybe we don't have that individual extreme that some other societies have, where some people are extremely well off and extremely happy, not necessarily the same people, by the way, and others are suffering. We don't necessarily have that to the same degree, I think, is one of the things I've recognized in living all these years in Finland. But they're definitely not running around singing Kumbaya.
Right. So I'm trying to critique my own statement, which is, if you're around joyful people, that you have this sort of contagion effect and you get this joy. Now, the opposite certainly is true in literature. If I'm around people who are unhappy, who are neurotic, then it just sucks me down, right? We share emotions. That's what social creatures do. So I think we should put a caveat on what I said earlier, which is I don't necessarily have to be around people expressing joy if they have this internal sense of happiness, right? If they are satisfied with their lives, if they feel like they have purpose and meaning. it's okay, right? Those are people who, they don't have to be giggling all the time. So I want to be really clear on that I don't have to search out, I don't know, clowns to kind of be around, or I don't know, actors or something, someone who's expressing a lot of emotion. I think that when you get to know people, when they do have this sense of satisfaction, right? I'm doing something in the world that's valuable, and I'm of service to the people around me. Then you get that kind of caring. Then you get the sort of 4 birthday parties I talked about, right? People who really care about you. So I always like to say, Andrew, that I have like 4 or 5 what I call 3 a.m. friends. This is a joke for listeners. I'm making a joke now. But by that, I mean the people you can call at 3 a.m. with a crisis. Here's the joke. And I say, you know, bring a shovel, bring some lime, don't ask questions. And they'll just show up. And, you know, maybe twice in my life have I had to make a sort of 2 a.m., 3 a.m. call to a friend and saying, I'm having a crisis in my family. I need your help now. And they will get out of bed. They will come to where I am. That's an amazing thing. And if you have a couple of those people in your life, again, I'm sort of critiquing what I said or improving what I've said. You don't need 500 people in your Facebook group who, you know, see the sign of your birthday and send you a happy birthday. What you need is those couple 3 a.m. friends who really have invested so much in that relationship. So I have, you know, probably, you know, 8 or 9 guy friends that are like brothers to me. Sorry, my dog is making noise now. Who are like, I call them brothers. Like, I call, hey brother, I miss you, I love you, man. Like, that's an amazing thing. So if you have that kind of relationship where you've got people who, you know, you've spent so many years with, so much time with, who are like family members that you can really count on in a crisis, even just having a couple of those is plenty in terms of building that joy muscle. You don't need, you know, 100 of these people. So I just want to be really clear on that. I think I was a little bit sloppy in my intro when I talked about the contagion effect of joy.
Yeah, no, and I think it's super important. I think our research, when we looked into the power of joy, I think we found in America, I think it was 8% of people said they had no 3 o'clock in the morning friends, not one. And those are the people with really low joy scores. So it's, you know, I think, Paul, what you're saying, it's super important that you don't need a big network, but you really do need to try and cultivate at least 1 or 2 relationships where you feel that safety, that you're not alone. Because there's a difference between, I think, being alone and being lonely, which people sometimes confuse. Yeah, especially introverts. We like being alone. It's fine. But that sense of, you can be in a relationship and still feel alone, right? You could be married and still feel emotionally alone, which is sometimes harder than being actually alone and alone. So, you know, to really find that. And on the other thing, I love what you said about noticing if people drag you down and being, you know, maybe ruthless in a way, and cutting out people in your life who don't add to your joy, who actually detract from it, to suck your energy. Because life's hard. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of things happening. So, you know, try not to, in addition to that, in your downtime, in your free time, in the let's go have fun time, find yourself coming back from places like that, go, oh, that Brian, he's always, you know, moaning about stuff and can't ever see the bright side of life. And you know, if you find yourself thinking things like that, maybe you need to think, well, is Brian really somebody you want to spend your free time with anymore?
Yeah. And let's lean into the loneliness issue too. So for people who are feeling more alone, some, you know, active things you could do. One is volunteering. And so many organizations need volunteers. In many countries, I'm guessing this is true in Finland. I spent a lot of time in Denmark. I have an appointment at a medical school in Denmark. In Denmark, there's a very strong history of volunteering. Even as children, they're always volunteering. Finland's small and cold. I'm guessing you guys have a similar kind of culture. In the US, we also have a culture of volunteering. And Tocqueville talked about this, you know, 100 plus years ago. So there's a lot of organizations that would love to have more time, and just helping out is an amazing thing. So a concrete example, Andrew, I do a lot of hiking with my dog, and sort of on trails, you know, nature areas. And at some point I thought, man, there's volunteers that clean these trails or whatever, and I should volunteer. So I did. and they trained me on how to drive these, scrapey machines. And let me tell you, and then people are using the trails. They're doing this during the day, and so literally almost everybody who, I stopped the machine and let people go by, and they all thanked me, and I felt so good. I was just doing it because I thought I should contribute to the system that I, kind of use the resources of, but I forgot about the human component. I'm like, oh yeah, I've talked about this so much, but now I'm doing it, and I got so much pleasure. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna keep doing this. This is really nice. So the first is you can volunteer. Lots and lots of organizations would love to have people's time. It embeds you in a little community of other volunteers. You meet people. So that's the first. The second is dogs. So I've done a lot of research in I've published some research in my lab, moderate amount, in which we look at animal-human relationships. And the same kind of neurologic measures of attachment that we have with human beings, we get with dogs. Less so with cats, by the way. We've done a dog versus cat study, which is published. Dogs are, we created dogs, right, to kind of be our best friends. And so, for example, my dog's lying here at my feet, hanging out with me all day. We take walks. And what happens when you walk a dog? Well, it turns out that people who have dogs are seen as much more trustworthy than people who don't. And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 200 pounds. I'm a kind of a potentially scary looking human. But people see that dog, they come over, hey, can I pet your dog? Oh, what's your dog's name? Right. So all of a sudden that dog is facilitating the kinds of social interactions that people would not probably normally have with me, because I'm not I don't think I'm a bad looking, scary person. I don't have tattoos on my face or anything, but, just from a safety perspective, like, single women will come over and chat with me, which, from a safety perspective, if it's, whatever, 6 a.m. and still kind of dark and you wouldn't normally do, maybe 6 a.m. when it's dark, people don't cross the street to talk to me, but, during the day, whatever. So dogs are a great way to get both the neurologic value of social connection and to facilitate greater connections with other people.
Two great points, Paul. I think the volunteering one's really interesting. I remember we looked into the positive impact you can have on people and on the planet. And there's many issues out there. There's many organizations focusing on stuff. So, you can either randomly choose something, or you can think about yourself, what you're interested in, right? And maybe if you've got a hobby, like you said, with your hiking, I say, well, I can volunteer related to that. And just find something, even if it's just a couple of hours a week, just to give it a go. And the good thing about volunteering is you're not signing your life away to a long-term commitment. So go try it out. Didn't like it, didn't like the group. Hey, no worries. Tell them can't show up next week. Go try something else and find something that works for you. And I think as Paul said, you'll find the reward you get from that, from other people, is immense when they express their gratitude to you for doing this. I think it's what's one of the famous expressions, that being selfless is the most selfish thing you can do, because it's so beneficial to you.
Let's talk about that for just a minute. So there is this kind of debate in philosophy, although not in neuroscience, that to connect to others, you have to be selfless, as you said. But what we find neurologically is, in fact, that people get a lot of their own joy, their own neurologic value from that. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So if I want to volunteer at my animal shelter because I like being around animals or animal people, that's great. If I want to volunteer at a hospital and talk to people on the hospice ward, probably harder, but also very valuable, right? So if you get joy from that, or if you feel that you've done something that's valuable or important, there's no problem with that. That's the reason we keep doing it. So don't feel like you have to volunteer on something that's just you dread doing. So there's a wonderful video. They're bankrupt now, but anyway, there's a group called The Big Idea, something like that. You can Google, YouTube it. It's of these interesting people doing interesting things. There was an older gentleman who was retired, sitting at home, not a lot to do, and he volunteered, I think it's in Cincinnati, to hold premature babies that were ill. So the babies are born and the parents have jobs, and so they can't be there. And that human contact is really good. He just sits in a rocking chair for a couple hours every day, and he holds the babies. And they interviewed him, and they said, like, it's so nice that you do this. He goes, no, it's not nice at all. I get so much pleasure from holding these little babies that just need love. And I feel all that. And my whole day is better. Talk about building that joy muscle, because I'm helping this little child, but they're helping me too. He shows up, people know him at the hospital. He's been doing this for years. This wonderful old grandpa just holding these little premature babies. And even they talk to the nurses, and nurses go, oh, he's like a mystery to us, because these babies they're sick, they don't feel good. He puts them on his chest and they just calm down, they go to sleep, and they get healthier. So, it can be fine. You can get, joy from that. There's no problem at all.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love the thing you said early on, right at the beginning, about taking your kids to the hospice or to the old people's home to have that interaction, because it's so beneficial for both. There's a lot of old people who would really like to interact. My own father has dementia, and when I take my young daughter to see him, you just see the way his eyes light up in a very different way from when an adult comes to visit him. So there's that sort of connection between old and young, which, we traditionally had between grandparents and grandchildren, but in many families, due to distances, people moving, those connections aren't there on a regular basis. So you can surrogate that, either by going with your kids to visit old people's homes, or vice versa. If you're an older person, offering to volunteer to read at schools. That's something my mother's done for many years, and has found great pleasure just going in and reading just for half an hour to the young school kids. An immense pleasure for the kids, a break for the teacher, and also, a wonderful thing for her to feel a sense of connection to that youthful energy. So I think that's...
I want to reinforce that, Andrew. So again, in published research from my lab, we find that for older people in particular, so as we get older, we get better at emotional regulation. We can experience joy more. So we published research showing that. But also, people who volunteer, like your mother, actually have greater neurologic signals saying that they're experiencing joy, just not on self-report, but they're experiencing joy. So there is published research that volunteering, that connection, that service to others improves their affect, their emotional states, and improves their ability to connect to others, which is going to extend health span. So again, we have another interesting philosophical dilemma, which is, even if you are the most selfish person in the world and you just want to live as long and as healthy as possible, you need to be of service to others.
Yeah. And as we said, there's not a shortage of things you can focus on, but maybe finding something you're passionate about to get a double win, I think is what we're saying. That if you're really putting your energy into it, you're loving it when you're doing it.
Right. So yeah, so when my kids get out of the house, I had kind of more time. People used to ask me when my kids were smaller, like, what are your hobbies? I'm like, I have like 3 jobs and kids. Like, I have no hobbies. My kids are my hobby. But now that my kids are older and they're out of the house, then I go, I have actually time to have hobbies, and basically built a group of friends, and we do a lot of outdoor activities. And so today's Wednesday. On Saturday, I'm going to get up at 5 in the morning and meet my friends. We're going to go out and do a bunch of outdoor physical stuff, get dirty, get stinky, and then go, 3-4 hours later, go have breakfast and hang out and talk. And, it's one of the real joys of my life. And I'm 61, and I probably started hanging out with these guys in, 5 years ago. So even as a, relatively older person, or whatever, later middle age, we can still form these groups, right? So find people with shared interests. And for whatever reason, I tend to be the organizer. So, the people have, everyone's still working and all that. So people are busy. And so I'll like ping people, hey, how's next weekend look, or the weekend after? So again, you can be the organizer. Sometimes I feel like, why am I the organizer? Someone else should be doing this. But these are my dear friends. Why should I feel bad because I'm, bugging them to hang out? So again, everyone's busy, we get that, but if you can kind of organize that or schedule it, it's really nice. So think of scheduling these social activities 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance so that people can arrange their schedules and all that. And if every all of those, whatever, 6 or 7 people are going to show up, only 4 show up, it's still fine. We're still going to have fun, right? So it's you still have to be, we're all volunteering or whatever to do this. We're not obligated, but yeah, be the organizer. I'm just revealing that even I have a bad personality. Even I'm so special, but like sometimes I just get like, man, I've been bugging you guys for 4 weeks to hang out and everyone's too busy, and I get frustrated. And then last week my friend goes, hey, I'm free this coming weekend. You guys want to do stuff? We're like, yeah, let's do it. Okay, great. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Paul, I was thinking that if anybody listening in has some questions, put them in the chat. Happy to ask them out. One thing that came to my mind when you were talking about your app and talking about the research that you've done, the geek in me is interested to know, do you see a difference between people's joy and immersion when they're at work and not at work? And then more specifically, do you see a difference in your data about people working from home versus working in a office or other sort of herd environment?
What a great question. Literally just before I got on, Andrea was giving a talk on this, on how to create extraordinary customer experiences. And the root of that is extraordinary employee experiences. And so one of the takeaways from the work we've done on that is that when you have a mission rather than a job, then people put much more energy in. If I know how the work I'm doing improves people's lives, I call this the lived purpose of an organization. When that's really alive in employees, then they're much more focused on creating that value for others and then getting that reflection, that feedback of the joy they're bringing to customers. So for customer facing individuals, but even, people in the back room. So in my business, I do talk to customers, but mostly I'm research, I'm R&D guy, and so gosh, when I get on a Zoom and talk to a customer or a prospect, I'm so excited because, I'm working from home a lot of days. So again, I think that working from home, working from office, I think it's really important to be around humans. And so really think about, for employers, think about creating the office as a social emotional hub, right? That's a place where the interesting people are doing really cool things that make the world a better place. So you can create that environment so that people really want to come in. I'm sort of against like forcing people to come in, a la Google and Apple, like you need to be in the office at least 4 days a week. Well, then you kind of, get people's, defensive mode to come up. But think about other ways that you can make that office that social emotional hub. It could be lunchtime yoga. It could be, wellness programs, or having life coaches. A lot of companies have life coaches now because we have such broad work-life integration, right? So we are working on the road. We're working from home some days. Meals are a great hack that I really love. The kind of Google approach where, hey, we're gonna buy you guys lunch, but it's only from 12 to 12:45 or whatever. So I'm sure this is much more common in Finland. So when I was working in Denmark, every day there was a joint lunch that almost even small businesses have these little canteens, and people kind of know when lunchtime is, and you show up and sit at these long tables, and all of a sudden you're meeting people. I was coming there as a contractor, so I'm only there for a week or a month or whatever, depending on the project. But I love those canteens because I met so many, for me, kind of odd people. But they're Danish people, and they talk about their lives, and it's so interesting. And maybe it's just one conversation, and I never see them again, but it's so interesting. So here, one more suggestion. Some years ago, because I thought about the value of social connection, I decided I would become an elevator talker. So it's very odd as a social creature to be in a box for 20, 30 seconds or 40 seconds or 60 seconds and not want to talk to and or make eye contact with another human in the box. So I thought I'll run a little experiment and see what happens. And so for about half the people I talk to in elevators, I do it all the time now, they are super happy that they've been recognized. They smile, hey, what do you do? Like a hotel or an office building? Oh, which office are you going to? Or where are you coming in from? Or just standard stuff. And half those people, you have a really interesting little conversation. They get out the door and it's pleasant. We're going to sit there and just stare at the numbers on the elevator and not talk. It's just weird to me. Now, the other half of the people are freaked out. That also makes me somehow happy. They're like, why are you talking to me? I'm like, because we're in a box together for 30 seconds. How about saying hello? How are you? And they're kind of freaked out. And it also makes me sort of weirdly happy that they're freaked out. So again, I'm not being a stalker. I'm not standing super close to them. I'm not being aggressive, right? I'm just saying hello. And I think that's appropriate. So if we think about every place we go about saying hello to people, I even say hello to people in New York City on the street. I'm one of those weird people. And generally people like it. We don't really want to be separated. And neurologically, our brains are not set up to be isolated. We do not flourish on our own. We need the humans. So why not try to bring a little bit of joy to the people around us and then get that reflection? So I'll give you a concrete example, Andrew, and then listeners can Google this later on YouTube. So some years ago, again in Denmark, there's a famous chocolate brand that Andrew knows. If you're in Europe, you know it, called Anton Berg. So Anton Berg's tagline is, "You can never be too generous." And some years ago, they said, "Hey, we're interested in the neurologic response of gift giving, and that's kind of your stuff. We'd like to do a little film about this. Could you come tell us about it?" And I said, well, how about if you guys fund an experiment and we just film that? Like, oh, that'd be so cool. And so unlike the QR code I put up where you can get an app for your phone to measure neurologic connection, immersion, joy, we hadn't developed that yet. So we were doing blood draws. And so they indeed funded an experiment in Copenhagen in December when it was dark, it was only light for like 2 hours a day, in which we brought in couples. And just like Finnish men, Andrew, Danish men also don't show a lot of emotion. And so they brought in their partners, wives or girlfriends or whatever. And the task was, we took blood from the men when they came in, and they were given some Anton Berg chocolate, but they were asked to sit in a room and write why their partner was so important to them, and then present the chocolate and read what they had written. And then I did a second blood draw. So what we found is that, this kind of marker of social connection that's associated with joy, oxytocin, spiked in the men when they gave the gift to their partners. And if you look at the film, you can see, because again, these just by culture, these men are not very expressive emotionally. And there was older gentlemen who I think had never said they love you to their wife since the day they got married, 50 years ago. And a lot of these women just started crying. They couldn't believe it. It was so powerful. And this was released again. It was marketing, and they paid me something to do it. But this got like 100 million views the first month it came out. Like it is really fundamentally valuable. You don't even need to really see the blood results to know that you had an impact on people. So it wasn't the chocolate, it was the sentiment. So oftentimes we in the Western world in particular feel like, I don't want to share my emotional state with the people around us because I don't want to talk about it, or it's weird. So I've tried very hard in my life, Andrew, to tell more people around me that I love them, on the phone, in person, just to make sure that they are aware of how important they are to me. If you ramp that back one step for colleagues, sometimes the word love in English is very complicated, so many kinds of love. But instead, I use the word service sometimes. So I try to end every conversation with the word service. I think we talked about this on the podcast, Andrew. Right? So if I say to a work colleague or a customer or whatever, hey, let me know how it can be of service to you. Right? That says, I care about you. I want to see you do well in life. I want to see you flourish. I will invest some resources to help you do that. So I think that service word is actually a nice way to say, I love you in a very soft way, or I care about you, or whatever that proper word is. So anyway, so that's my suggestion. Try to end every conversation with the word service. So Andrew, I'll do that with you now to demonstrate. Andrew, what a pleasure to talk to you. It's I don't know, third or fourth time now we've had a chance to stay together, talk together. This time we're doing it in front of an audience. It is an amazing experience to spend time with you, with Debbie. The Year of Joy is an amazing idea. So I want to be of service to you. So please reach out anytime I can help you. I will do it. Pretty much anything you ask me to do, I'm going to do at this point. So I feel very connected to you. And the time we spent together has been extraordinarily valuable to me. So I want to make sure that I reciprocate and create value for you. So that's all it takes, right? And how's that feel?
Oh, it feels amazing, Paul. And it feels two things to me. It feels, I get this sort of energy burst inside me that makes me feel that, yes, all the hard work we're putting in is worthwhile, it's appreciated, and I'm not alone. We're not alone. There are all these people out there who are also on wonderful missions. And when we come together and do something, it doubles, it triples the value of what we're doing. So I think it's contagious, as you said. You get this contagion feeling. And I want to say just back to you then, hey, what can I do more for you, Paul? I know we're doing this to promote what you're doing, but more. I want to do more. The work you're doing is so wonderful, and to get it out there. So obviously the people listening today will get have had a chance to hear you. We'll be publishing this in the community, as well as sharing it with our partner organizations so they can share it with their employees, because I think it's super important. We touched a lot on work and the importance of employee engagement as well as customer engagement. And I think, the work you're doing shows huge value to companies for how they can benefit as businesses, but also help their employees thrive as people, which ultimately, we want. People's work. You talked about work-life integration, how important that is that day. So, I think the more we can spread the work you're doing to companies to help them understand the value of this, we are more than happy to be of service to you in that way.
Thank you.
But that's unfortunately all we got time for, Paul. We've had another hour of our time together. It's a pleasure every time, an increased pleasure every time. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed listening in today to our conversation, as well as to all the great tips, Paul, that you shared at the beginning of the hour. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Andrew. I wish you great joy, and I look forward to our next conversation.